Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. All my thanks and gratitude for Almighty Allah for His countless blessings. I am Mumtaz Naeem. I am visiting teacher in Department of English Language, University of Education, Atak campus. The topic of my lecture is Thomas Hardy, more modern than modern writers. First of all, I would like to give you a brief introduction of Thomas Hardy. Thomas Hardy was born at Upper Blackhampton on the 2nd June 1840. His father was a master mason. Hardy owed much to his parents and their rural background. Inheriting from his father a love of music, from his mother a love of reading, and from both strength of personality as well as the stability which connected him in an age of change with a world already vanishing. Hardy as a novelist. According to Hardy's own classification, his novels fall into three groups. Firstly, the novels of ingenuity and experiment. Secondly, the novels of romances and fantasies. And thirdly, the novels of character and environment. To the first two groups belong such charming and pleasant tales as Desperate Remedies, A Pair of Blue Eyes, and The Trumpet Major, all written between 1870 and 1880. His masterpieces, Far from the Madding Crowd, The Return of the Native, The Mirror of Casterbridge, Tess of the D'Urbervilles, and Jude the Obscure, belong to the third group, the novels of character and environment. Plots. The philosophy of life, the element of chance. Hardy plots are, for the most part, simple. The passions he depicted are the elemental ones of love, greed, jealousy, ambition, the thirst for power and knowledge, and the springs of action that move his characters as psychological. In the course of his development as a novelist, Hardy's interest shifts from the outer framework of experience to the inner world of feeling. His novels become moral dramas in which conflict of wills driven by passions predominate. But these conflicts are not entirely determined from within. They are disturbed and complicated by the repeated workings of blind chance. His philosophy of life presupposes the idea of cruelty inherent in the pattern of the universe and of a system with its own relentless laws that human beings ignore or deny until they are overtaken by an apparently hostile destiny and destroyed. Moral retribution. Moral retribution is the law of Hardy's universe, and all unknowingly his characters aid its workings. It exercises its remote control over their lives, and every careless and irresponsible action brings in the end a tragic harvest of pain and bitterness. Nothing can be avoided. The part played by mischief and malignant fate in human life creates the peculiar atmosphere of hopelessness which overwhelms his heroes. The terrible philosophy of the great novels. The Woodlanders, with its magnificent Shakespearean conclusion, the Mayor of Casterbridge, Tess of the Tubervilles, and Jude the Obscure. These novels are singularly impressive. These are somber stories of broken lives and of frustration. Time and again, Hardy had implied that fate seems to load the dice against the unselfish, loyal and gentle. Once Hardy wrote to his friend about his philosophy of life. So far as my experience goes, conclusions about the universe do not affect the spirits which are a result of temperament. What does depress me is the sight of so much pain in the world, constant pain, and it did just as much when I was an Orthodox churchman as now. For no future happiness can remove from the past sufferings that had been endured. Both Tess and Jude the Obscure were written when despair at the world's pain had mounted within Hardy's mind to a desperate defiance. Hardy as a traditionalist novelist. Historically speaking, Hardy the novelist is a major transitional figure between the popular moralist and popular entertainers of Victorian fiction, and the serious visionary, often symbolizing novelist of today. He stands massively between the talented but often compromising Victorian giants and the meditative and austere Conrad. The great movement from Victorian to modern is reflected, in fact, within Hardy's own novel writing career. His first published novel, Desperate Remedies, 1871, has much in common with the so-called sensation novel of the Victorians. But with Jude the Obscure, 1895, we have entered both the more austere aesthetic of the modern novel and the dark world in which we live. The dismal unfaith and directionless society of Jude, the anxieties of sexual maladjustment and social misemployment, the chronic self-destructiveness of both Jude and Sue, the total vision of weakened vitality and grey despair. These are all 20th century characteristics, modern as well as traditional. The fact is that Hardy was at his best both traditional and modern, capable of both extreme simplicity of narrative and complex psychological insight. Donald Davidson, for instance, firmly establishes Hardy as a traditional and almost timeless teller of tales, and remarks that the most literary of the novels are the weakest. Yet another critic, Morton Dowen Zabel, is fully as persuasive in describing Hardy's modern tensions and ambiguities and his role in freeing the novel from an unenergized realism. Says this critic, he now appears to us as a realist developing towards allegory, as an imaginative artist who brought the 19th century novel out of its slavery to fact and its dangerous reaction against popularity, and so prepared the way for some of the most original talents of a new time. He stands in a succession of novelists that includes Emily Bronte and Hawthorne, that takes in James and Flaubert in the wider reach of their faculties, and that has arrived at the achievements of Joyce, Proust, Guide, and Kafka. The Mirror of Casterbridge, an example. Even a single novel may be described as both traditional and modern. Most notably, The Mirror of Casterbridge. This novel is a traditional tragedy suggestive of Lear, Hamlet, Oedipus, and one that assumes in the ancient way the existence of a moral order in terms of which man's experience can be rendered as the drama of his salvation as well as the drama of his damnation. It is the moral order that will be satisfied with less than the total humiliation of the offender. Yet this novel represents a very modern dramatization of an impulse to self-destruction, of what Hardy called Henchard's self-alienation. The blend of the real and the fantastic. Not only the modern novelist is prey to tension and ambivalences, the most important tension for Hardy was the simple desire to juxtapose plausible human beings and strange, uncommon events, or to put up together the real and the fantastic. He found his immediate master not in another novelist, but in a poet, George Crabbe, who similarly blended rural realism with ironic or tragic mischance. In this respect, Hardy was a conscious anti-realist opposed to the documentary and the drab. In spite of a close fidelity to the physical world. The conflict in Hardy. One of the commonest conflicts in the modern novelist is between sympathy and judgment, between unconscious allegiance and conscious commitment, between unmoral identification and rational preference. We may dislike those we admire and feel drawn towards those we condemn. The man in whom feeling and belief wholly coincided might be free from anxiety, but he would probably not write novels. In Hardy, we find a predilection de artist for the aristocrat and at the same time a moral antagonisms to the aristocrat. Hardy's private sympathy is for the individual against the community, yet he must show that individual destroyed. To put it differently, he envied rebellion and non-conformity, and he thought that he approved of them. In fact, he identified rather with the docile and the unaggressive. It must at once be added, however, that it is hard to conceive of a great novel without some secret identifying sympathy for the outlaw. Perhaps much sympathy partly accounts for the greatness of the Mirror of Casterbridge. Directness more than subtlety. Hardy was a great, humane, simple, even primitive novelist, and one who left little to be explained in the way of elusive symbolic content or technical subtlety. He had the courage and tact to be both obvious and direct, where the human material was of sufficient importance. This is clear from the great memorable scenes in the Mirror of Casterbridge, beginning with the sale of the wife, a story as simple as scripture history, unforgettable surely is the Firmity's seller's appearance before Henchard as the magistrate, and her story of the large crime she had witnessed 20 years before. This is the big moment of the book, and the average novelist would give it 20 pages or more, would perhaps go into Hencher's mind and into the woman's mind, and would doubtless describe at length the hubbub in the courtroom. Hardy gets over the scene in 4 pages. Not subtlety or elaboration of art, but the imagined material itself gives the best scenes of the novel their strength. Hardy in our times. Today, Hardy would appear to survive rather as a popular and even primitive novelist, reaching us through pure narrative gifts and antique simplicities of understanding and art. His sluggish schematizing intellect may repel us, but his dark wisdom and brooding temperament prevail. In the 1930s, Hardy's gloomy visions seemed perverse. This is hardly true today. The love of the macabre coincidence and the grotesque mischance, the cruel imaginings and manipulations, all the bad luck and all the mismatched destinies, the darkness of the physical and moral landscapes, the awareness of dwindling energies, and the sense of man's appalling limitations. All these are peculiarly modern, yet quite as fundamental are a timeless traditionalism and as unmodern purity of temperament and a most uninhibited compassions. Far behind Hardy's statistics, imaginings, and pessimistic declarations lie. Of course, a deep concern for the fortunes of his characters, as incorrigible sympathy for all who are lonely and all who long for happiness. Hardy was both a serious man and a popular traditional storyteller. He was moreover simultaneously ancient and modern. Dear students, there is a slide in which references are written. These references help you to understand Thomas Hardy as a modern writer who was honored as a popular writer of his time. He was the novelist who got reputation on account of his novels, which had a blend of the traditionalist and modern writers. I thank to all of you for your listening to me. Thank you very much.